They said the secret ingredient would make her husband love her forever, but they didn't tell her it would invite the ancestors to dinner. In the Igbo village of Umu-Ofi, there is a pot that must never be uncovered after sunset. A pot that has been buried beneath the old Iroko tree for 40 years. A pot that still steams, even now, with a meal that was never finished. This is the story of Nkiruka, the kindest woman in Umu-Ofi, the most devoted wife, the most loving mother, the woman who wanted so desperately to keep her family together that she listened to a voice in the forest, the woman who added a small ingredient to her soup just once and watched as her husband and children began to change. Nkiruka had been married to Chinedu for 12 years, and for 12 years she had been the model wife. But she woke before dawn to prepare his meals. She kept their compound spotless. She bore him 3 healthy children, Amara, Obina, and little Kioma. She never complained, never raised her voice, never gave him cause for displeasure. And yet, somehow, it wasn't enough. She first noticed the change 6 months ago. Chinedu started coming home later from the farm. His eyes would wander during meals, as if searching for something she couldn't provide. His touch became perfunctory, obligatory. The warmth that once lived in his smile had cooled to polite tolerance. He's taken a second wife, her co-wife, Adaize said, with barely concealed satisfaction. Adaize was Chinedu's first wife, and she'd never quite forgiven him for marrying Nkiruka. I heard he's been visiting Neka, the yam seller's daughter. She's young, pretty, and she laughs at his jokes. The words cut deeper than any blade. Nkiruka had given Chinedu everything: her youth, her devotion, her very identity. The thought of being replaced, of watching her children grow up, calling another woman mother, filled her with a desperate, clawing fear. That night, as she stirred the evening soup, tears fell silently into the pot. She didn't even notice. "Mama, why are you crying?" little Kioma asked, tugging at her wrapper. "I'm not crying, my sweet," Nkiruka lied, wiping her eyes quickly. "It's just a pepper. Go play with your sister." But it wasn't the pepper. It was the slow, aching knowledge that love could fade. That devotion wasn't always rewarded. That being good and kind and perfect wasn't always enough. As the children played outside and Adaize gossiped with neighbors, Nkiruka made a decision. She would visit Mama Ugotchi, the old herbalist who lived at the edge of the forest. People said Mama Ugotchi knew things, ancient things, secret things, things that could change a woman's fate. The next morning, while everyone still slept, Nkiruka slipped away from the compound and walked the narrow path into the forest. The trees grew dense here, blocking out the early morning light. Birds fell silent as she passed. The air grew heavy, thick with something that wasn't quite mist and wasn't quite smoke. Mama Ugotchi's hut appeared suddenly, as if the forest had hidden it until Nkiruka was close enough to see. The old woman sat outside, grinding herbs in a mortar, though Nkiruka hadn't heard her working until she was already there. "I've been expecting you," Mama Ugotchi said, without looking up. Her voice was like dried leaves scraping against stone. You have?" Nkiruka asked, startled. "Desperate women always find their way to my door. You all wear the same face, hungry for love, terrified of losing it." The old woman finally looked up, and Nkiruka gasped. Mama Ugotchi's eyes were completely white, no pupils, no color, just milky emptiness. Yet somehow, Nkiruka felt seen, truly, deeply seen, for the first time in months. "Can you help me?" Nkiruka whispered. "My husband, he's losing interest. I think he wants another wife. I can't lose him. I can't lose my family." Mama Ugotchi was silent for a long moment. studying Nkuruka with his terrible white eyes. "There are many kinds of help," she finally said. "Some heal, some harm, some do both at once. What you ask for, binding a man's heart when it wants to wander, that comes at a price." "I'll pay anything," Nkiruka said quickly. Too quickly. The old woman smiled, showing gums empty of teeth. "That's what they all say, and they always regret it." She reached into her wrapper and pulled out a small clay container, no bigger than Nkiruka's thumb. Inside was a powder the color of dried blood. "Add a pinch of this to your husband's food every evening for 7 days. His love will return. His eyes will see only you. He will never want another woman as long as he lives." Nkiruka's hands trembled as she reached for the container. "That's all? Just cook with it?" "That's all," Mama Ugotchi confirmed. "But remember, there are rules. You must cook alone. No one can see you add the powder. You must never taste the food yourself. And most importantly," her voice dropped to a whisper, "you must never, ever ask where the powder comes from or what it's made of. Some knowledge carries its own course." "I won't ask," Nkiruka promised, clutching the container like a precious jewel. "Thank you, Mama Ugotchi. Thank you so much." As she turned to leave, the old woman called out one more warning. "And Nkiruka, once you start, you cannot stop. The spirits that grant this gift must be fed. Always fed. Remember that." But Nkiruka was already running back through the forest, her heart light with hope, the warning already fading from her mind like morning mist. She didn't see Mama Ugotchi's expression shift. The way the old woman's eyeless face twisted with something that might have been pity or might have been grim satisfaction. "Another one," Mama Ugotchi whispered to the empty forest. "Another one who thinks love can be stolen without consequence." The trees seemed to shiver in response. That evening, Nkiruka prepared Chinedu's favorite dish, ofe nsala, the white soup made with catfish and utazi leaves. She sent the children to play outside. She waited until Adais left to fetch water. And when she was finally alone in the cooking hut, she pulled out the small clay container. Her hands shook as she uncovered it. The powder inside didn't smell like anything. Not herbs, not spices, not even earth. It had no scent at all, which somehow made it more unsettling. "Just a pinch," she told herself. "Just one small pinch to save my marriage. That's not so wrong, is it?" She added the powder to the soup. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace, no evidence. And the soup looked and smelled exactly as it should. Rich, aromatic, perfect. When Chinedu came home that evening, she served him with trembling hands. "Ofe nsala," he said, barely glancing at the bowl. "Again?" "Your favorite." Nkiruka replied softly, watching his face for any sign of pleasure, of recognition, of love. He ate mechanically, his mind clearly elsewhere. Nkiruka felt her heart sink. Maybe the powder didn't work. Maybe Mama Ugotchi had lied. Maybe. Chinedu looked up mid-bite, and his eyes met hers. Really met hers, for the first time in months. "This is delicious," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "Better than usual. Did you do something different?" "No," Nkiruka lied, her pulse quickening. "Same as always." He smiled, actually smiled, and Nkiruka felt tears of relief prick her eyes. "You're such a good cook." "I don't tell you that enough. I don't appreciate you enough." He reached across the food and took her hand. His touch was warm, affectionate, everything she'd been craving. That night, for the first time in months, Chinedu held her close as they slept. Nkiruka lay awake, her heart singing with joy and relief. It worked, she thought. It actually worked. Just 6 more days, and he'll be mine forever. She didn't notice the subtle changes yet. Didn't notice how Chinedu's grip was just a little too tight, how his breathing sounded slightly wrong, too shallow, too rhythmic, like something mimicking sleep rather than actually sleeping. Didn't notice the shadow that had entered the odd, and now crouched in the corner, watching, waiting, growing stronger with each breath Chinedu took. We are building the largest library of African folklore. If you love the stories, please subscribe to help us keep these legends alive. Now, back to the story. By the third day, Chinedu was transformed. He couldn't stop touching Nkiruka, holding her hand, stroking her hair, pulling her close at every opportunity. His eyes followed her everywhere, tracking her movements with an intensity that should have been flattering, but instead felt wrong. "You're smothering her," Daisy complained. "Give the woman room to breathe." But Chinedu barely acknowledged his first wife anymore. All his attention, all his affection, all his focus had narrowed to a single point: Nkiruka. The children noticed too. "Papa keeps staring at you, Mama," Amara whispered. "It's strange. He's just being affectionate," Nkiruka said, but even she was starting to feel uneasy. This wasn't quite what she'd wanted. The devotion felt excessive, obsessive, like Chinedu wasn't expressing love so much as performing it, following a script written by something that didn't quite understand human emotion. On the fourth night, Nkiruka woke to find Chinedu sitting up in bed, staring at her in the darkness. "Chinedu," she whispered, "what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, but his voice sounded distant, hollow. "I just like watching you. You're so beautiful, so perfect. I could watch you forever." His smile was too wide. His eyes didn't blink. Nkiruka felt ice slide down her spine. "Come, lie down. You need to sleep." "I don't need sleep," Chinedu said, still smiling that too wide smile. "I just need you and your food. When will you make breakfast? I'm so hungry." It was the middle of the night. They'd eaten dinner just hours ago. In the morning, Nkiruka managed, pulling her wrapper tighter around herself. "Sleep now." Chinedu lay down obediently, but she could feel him staring at her in the darkness. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next day, she noticed Chinedu had stopped going to the farm. He just sat in the compound, watching the cooking hut, waiting for meals. When she asked him about his work, he waved it away. "The farm doesn't matter," he said. "Nothing matters except you, your care, your food." The children were changing too, and Nkiruka had started adding small pinches of the powder to their meals as well, just to make sure they stayed close, stayed loving, stayed hers. But like the father, their affection had become strange. When they stopped playing, they just sat, watching her cook, their eyes tracking her every movement. When she served them food, they ate with an intensity that frightened her, scraping bowls clean, licking their fingers, begging for more. "Mama, more soup," little Kioma would plead. "Please, Mama, I'm so hungry." But Nkiruka had just fed her an hour ago. By the sixth day, the entire household had descended into a bizarre nightmare. Chinedu, Amara, Obina, and Chioma sat around the cooking fire constantly, waiting, watching, their eyes never leaving Nkiruka. They barely spoke to each other anymore, all their attention focused solely on her. Even Adaeze noticed. "What's wrong with them?" she demanded. "They're acting possessed. What have you done?" "Nothing," Nkiruka insisted, but guilt and fear warred in her chest. They're just being affectionate." "That's not affection," Adaeze said sharply. "That's something else, something wrong." That night, Nkiruka decided she wouldn't add the powder to the seventh meal. She'd stop. Things were already better, too much better. Chinedu clearly wasn't going to leave her now. She'd achieved what she wanted. She'd stop, and everything would return to normal. But when she tried to prepare dinner without the powder, she found herself reaching for it anyway. Her hands moved on their own, uncovering the container, adding a pinch to the pot. No, she thought desperately. I said I'd stop. But her hands wouldn't listen. It was as if something else was controlling them, guiding them, ensuring the powder entered the food. She remembered Mama Ugotchi's warning. Once you start, you cannot stop. The spirits must be fed. What have I done? Onkiruka whispered to the empty cooking hut. What have I done? From the doorway, 4 voices answered in perfect unison. You fed us, Mama. You fed us so well. Onkiruka spun around to see her family standing there. Chinedu and the 3 children, all wearing identical smiles, all watching her with eyes that didn't quite look human anymore. We're so grateful, they said together, their voices overlapping into a horrible harmony. We'll never leave you now. Never, ever leave. Nkiruka screamed. After her family spoke in unison, they blinked and seemed to return to normal. Chinedu laughed. What's wrong with you, wife? We just came to see if dinner was ready. But Onkiruka had seen it, had heard it. Whatever the powder was doing to them, it was getting worse. She served the 7th meal with shaking hands, yet watching as her family devoured the food with disturbing intensity. As they ate, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Their shadows were wrong. In the firelight, normal shadows should flicker and dance. But the shadows cast by Chinedu and the children were perfectly still, solid, dense, and they seemed larger than they should be, darker, as if something was crouching behind each of them, wearing their shapes like a disguise. When the meal was finished, Chinedu looked at her with those 2 bright eyes. That was perfect, he said, but we're still hungry, so hungry. When's the next meal? Tomorrow, Nkiruka whispered. Tomorrow morning. That's so long, little Kioma whined, but her voice was wrong. Too deep, too old. Can't you make something now? Just a snack? No, Onkiruka said firmly, Foy making her brave. No more food tonight. You've all eaten enough. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on her, and for a moment, Nkiruka saw something behind those familiar faces. Something ancient and ravenous. Something that wasn't her husband or her children at all, but something using them, puppeting them, feeding through them. Then Chinedu smiled his normal smile. Of course, wife, you know best. We'll wait until morning. They filed out of the cooking huts, moving in perfect synchronization, and Nkiruka was left alone with the horrible realization of what she'd done. She'd invited something into her family, something that fed on whatever was in that powder. And now, it was too hungry to leave. That night, Onkiruka didn't sleep. She sat in the cooking hut, staring at the small clay container. It was almost empty now, maybe 2 or 3 pinches left. Then what? At midnight, she heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate footsteps circling the cooking hut. One set, then another, until 4 sets of feet walked in a circle around her, around and around and around. We're hungry, Mama, voices whispered from the darkness. So very hungry. Morning, Nkuruka called out, her voice cracking. Food in the morning. Morning, 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 morning. The voices chanted, overlapping, echoing. Hungry, 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 hungry. Nkuruka pressed her hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut, praying for dawn. When sunlight finally came, she found her family sitting at the breakfast spot, perfectly still, perfectly patient, watching the cooking hot with unblinking eyes. They'd been waiting all night. Mokiruka ran. She left the compound, before anyone could stop her, and fled through the forest to Mama Ugotchi's hut. The old woman was waiting outside, as if she'd known Nkiruka would come. "It's gotten worse, hasn't it?" Mama Ugotchi said. It wasn't a question. "What did you give me?" Nkiruka demanded, tears streaming down her face. "What is that powder? My family, they're not themselves anymore." "They're exactly themselves," Mama Ugotchi replied calmly. "Just with additional residents." "What does that mean?" The old woman sighed. "The powder is made from the ground bones of ancestors. Very old ancestors. Very hungry ancestors. When you feed it to someone, you're inviting those spirits to share the body. At first, they're subtle, just influencing emotions, encouraging devotion. But the more you feed them, the stronger they become. Eventually," she shrugged, "eventually, they take over completely." Nkiruka felt the world tilt. No, that can't be. You said it would make him love me. And it did. The spirits love you very much. You feed them, after all. They'll never let you go now." Mama Ugotchi's white eyes seemed to bore into Nkiruka's soul. "You wanted your family to stay with you forever. Well, they will. They'll never leave. They'll never stop loving you. They'll just slowly become something else. Something that wears their faces but isn't them anymore." "How do I stop it?" Nkiruka begged. "How do I save them?" "You can't," Mama Ugotchi said flatly. "Once the spirits have tasted life through borrowed flesh, they won't give it up. Your family belongs to them now. There has to be a way, please." The old woman was quiet for a long moment. "There is the one possibility, but you won't like it. I'll do anything. Stop feeding them." Nkiruka blinked. "What?" "Stop feeding them. The spirits sustain themselves on the powder in your cooking. If you stop adding it, they'll grow weak, desperate. They'll demand food, beg for food, threaten for food. But if you can resist, if you can starve them out, eventually they'll have to leave. And then my family will be normal again." Mama Ugotchi's expression was grim. "If there's enough of your family left inside those bodies to return to, the longer the spirits have been feeding, the more they've consumed. There might not be anything left to save." Nkiruka felt her legs give out. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing. "This is your fault," she gasped between tears. "You gave me that powder. You asked for it," Mama Ugotchi corrected. "You demanded a solution. I gave you exactly what you wanted. A way to keep your family close forever. I warned you there would be a price. I told you the spirits must be fed. You chose not to listen. But I didn't know. You didn't want to know," the old woman interrupted. "I told you not to ask where the powder came from, not to question what it was made of. But you didn't care, did you? As long as it gave you what you wanted." Nkiruka had no response, because Mama Ugotchi was right. She'd been so desperate, so afraid of losing Chinedu, that she'd ignored every warning, every sign, every instinct that told her this was wrong. "What happens if I stop feeding them and it doesn't work?" Nkiruka whispered. "What happens if the spirits don't leave?" Mama Ugotchi's face was grave. "Then you'll have a choice. Keep feeding them, keep the powder flowing, keep the spirits satisfied, and watch your family slowly disappear behind the masks of hungry ghosts. Or what? Or you join them." Nkiruka returned to the compound to find her family exactly where she'd left them, sitting, waiting, watching the cooking hut with unnatural patience. When they saw her, they smiled in perfect unison. "Mama's back," they said together. "Time to cook." Nkiruka's hands shook as she entered the cooking hut. She looked at the clay container. Only 2 pinches of powder remained. Then what? Would the spirits starve? Would her family return to normal? Or would they die? consumed from the inside by the hungry ancestors that had taken up residence in their flesh. She prepared the morning meal, her mind racing. Now every instinct screamed at her to add the powder, to keep the spirits satisfied, to maintain the illusion of her family's devotion. But Mama Ugotchi's words echoed in her mind. If you can starve them out. Her hand hovered over the pot. Add the powder, or don't. Feed the spirits or fight them. In the end, fear won. She added a pinch. When she served the food, her family descended on it like starving animals. Chinedu actually growled, a low, inhuman sound, as he snatched his bowl. The children fought over who got the largest portion, shoving each other with a violence that was completely unlike them. And their shadows had grown enormous now, towering dark shapes that loomed over the compound, visible even in the bright morning sun. Adais saw them and screamed, "Demons! You've brought demons into this house." But Nkiruka couldn't respond. She was too busy watching her family eat, watching the spirits inside them grow stronger, watching her husband and children disappear a little more with every bite. That afternoon, the clay container ran out. The last pinch of powder dissolved into the evening soup, and Nkiruka stared at the empty container with a mixture of relief and terror. It was over. For better or worse, she would have to stop feeding them. When she served dinner, her family ate with the usual disturbing intensity. But afterward, something changed. They began to fidget, to pace, to glance toward the cooking hut with increasing agitation. "Mama!" Chioma whimpered, and for a moment she sounded like herself again, like a frightened child. "Mama, I don't feel good. I feel you're empty." "Me too," Obina said. "Like there's something missing, something important." Chinedu stood abruptly. "Make more food." "You just ate," Nkiruka said, backing away. "Make more food." His voice had dropped an octave, resonating with something that definitely wasn't human. "There's no more," Nkiruka lied. "Nothing until tomorrow." The shadow behind Chinedu expanded, grew, until it blocked out the setting sun. From within that shadow, Nkiruka heard voices, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all ancient, all hungry, all speaking through her husband's mouth. "We know you're lying," the voices said. "We can smell it, the powder, the bones of our children, our grandchildren, our blood. You have more. You must have more. Feed us, feed us." The other children's shadows grew as well, towering dark shapes that bent and twisted in ways that defied natural law. From each shadow, more voices emerged, demanding, pleading, threatening. "Please, Mama," Amara begged, and her voice was layered with dozens of others. "We're so hungry. You don't know what it's like being this hungry. Please." Nkiruka ran. She fled to the back of the compound, to the small shrine where she prayed to her own ancestors. She fell to her knees before it, weeping. "Help me," she begged. "Please, someone help me. I've made a terrible mistake. I've let something evil into my family, and I don't know how to cast it out." The air around the shrine grew cold. And then, for the first time in her life, Nkiruka felt the presence of her real ancestors. Not the hungry ghosts from Mama Ugotchi's powder, but her actual bloodline, her actual protectors. A voice spoke, ancient and stern. "You invited strangers into your home and fed them at your children's table. You gave them power over those you were meant to protect. This is your mess. You must clean it." "How?" Nkiruka sobbed. "Starve them. No matter what they say, what they promise, what they threaten, do not feed them. If even a drop of that cursed powder enters your cooking, the spirits will have won. 7 days without feeding, and they will be weak enough to banish. But you must be strong. And if I'm not, If I give in, the voice grew sad, then your family is lost, and the spirits will spread. They'll demand you make more powder. They'll force you to feed others, to invite more ancestors into more bodies, until the entire village is consumed. This is how curses spread, child. One desperate act at a time. Nkiruka wiped her tears and stood. I'll do it. I'll starve them. I'll save my family. She turned to find Chinedu standing directly behind her, his eyes completely black now, his shadow stretching across the entire compound. No, he said in that voice of many, you won't. What followed was the longest 7 days of Nkiruka's life. Her family became monsters. They surrounded the cooking hut day and night, demanding food, begging for it, threatening her when she refused. Chinedu's voice grew deeper, more distorted, until it sounded like grinding stones. The children wept and pleaded and screamed, their voices layering over each other until it sounded like a choir of the damned. Just a little bit, Mama, they would cry. Just one more meal. We're so hungry. Don't you love us? Don't you want to feed your family? On the second day, they started to physically change. Chinedu's skin took on a gray pallor. The children's eyes sank into their skulls. Their movements became jerky, puppet-like, as if the spirits inside them were losing their grip on how human bodies should move. Adais fled the compound in terror, spreading word throughout the village that Nkiruka had cursed her family. People came to stare, to whisper, to throw stones and shout accusations. But no one came close enough to help. On the fourth day, the spirits grew desperate. They tried bargaining. We'll leave if you feed us one more time, the voices promised through Kioma's mouth. Just one meal, and we'll go. We swear it. But Nkiruka had learned not to trust spirits. She stayed in the cooking hut, barricaded behind pots and baskets, yet refusing to cook anything. On the sixth day, the spirits turned violent. They threw themselves against the walls of the cooking hut, screaming and howling. Chinedu's hands clawed at the door, leaving scratch marks that went impossibly deep into the wood. Feed us or we'll eat you, the voices roared. We'll crack your bones and suck the marrow. We'll devour your soul and use your body to cook for us. Feed us, feed us, feed us. Nkiruka called into a ball, hands over her ears, praying to her ancestors for strength. On the seventh day, silence fell. Nkiruka waited for hours, terrified to open the door, terrified to see what had become of her family. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, she heard a small voice, weak, human, achingly familiar. Mama? It was Kioma, just Kioma. No layered voices, no spirit echoes, just her daughter. Nkiruka threw open the door to find her family collapsed on the ground, their skin pale, their bodies weak, but their eyes were clear again. Human again, the shadows were gone. Mama, Amara whispered, what happened? I feel like I've been having a nightmare for weeks. Where were we? Obina asked, confused and frightened. Chinedu looked up at her, and Nkiruka saw her husband, truly looking at her for the first time since she'd started using the powder. Not with obsessive devotion, not with hollow affection, but with genuine human recognition. Nkiruka, he said weakly, something was inside me, inside all of us. I could feel it, hear it, but I couldn't stop it. It was so hungry. Nkiruka fell to her knees and gathered her family into her arms, weeping with relief and guilt and overwhelming gratitude. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry I did this to you. I was afraid of losing you, and I made a terrible mistake. What did you do? Chinedu asked. But before Nkiruka could answer, the air grew cold. The shadows around the compound darkened, and a voice spoke, not from any person, but from the ground itself, from the air, from the very fabric of the world. "The death remains," the voice said. 7 days without feeding. The spirits are banished from these vessels, but the death remains. Nkiruka felt ice flood her veins. "What death? They're free. I starved the spirits out." "You invited us into your home," the voice replied. "You fed us for 7 days. That creates an obligation, a binding. We are owed 7 times 7 days of feeding. We have received 7, 42 remain." "No," Nkiruka whispered. "No, that wasn't the deal. There are always terms you don't hear," the voice said, almost amused. "Always prices you don't see until it's time to pay. You wanted your family bound to you. Very well, they are free. But now, you are bound to us." The ground beneath the cooking hut began to glow with a sickly green light. The clay pot, the one Nkiruka had used to cook all those cursed meals, began to steam, even though there was no fire beneath it. "No!" Chinedu staggered to his feet, pulling his children behind him. "Take me instead. Whatever the price is, I'll pay it." "The debt is not yours," the voice said. "She made the bargain. She must pay." The ground opened up beneath Nkiruka. Not a hole exactly, but a doorway, a passage to somewhere else, somewhere dark and cold and impossibly old. "Mama!" the children screamed. Nkiruka felt herself being pulled down into that darkness. She caught one last glimpse of her family, her husband, reaching for her children crying, all of them free and alive, and themselves again. It was enough. "I love you," she called out, as the darkness claimed her. "I'm sorry, but you're safe now. The earth closed over her head, and Nkiruka fell into the realm of the hungry spirits, where she would cook for them. 42 days of preparing feasts for the endless dead, of feeding mouths that could never be satisfied, of serving spirits whose hunger was as eternal as death itself. When the villagers found Chinedu and the children collapsed outside the cooking hut, there was no sign of Nkiruka, just a steel steaming pot buried halfway in the ground, a pot that no amount of digging could fully uncover. Chinedu tried, as he dug until his hands bled, until other men had to physically drag him away. But the pot remained, steaming with a meal that never cooled, never spoiled, and never finished cooking. The village elders consulted with Mama Ugotchi, who confirmed what everyone already suspected. Nkiruka had traded herself to save her family. She was gone, not dead, exactly, but not alive, in any way that mattered to the mortal world. "Can we bring her back?" Chinedu demanded. Mama Ugotchi shook her head. "She made a bargain with the hungry dead. Only she can fulfill it. 42 days of service, the spirit said. If she completes it without failing, without breaking, she might be released." "Might?" Chinedu's voice cracked. "Not will." "The spirits are not known for their mercy," Mama Ugotchi said quietly, "but they are known for honoring bargains. If she serves faithfully, cooks perfectly, never refuses, there's a chance. A small one." Chinedu sank to the ground, broken. His children gathered around him, all of them weeping for the woman who had saved them by sacrificing herself. That night, and every night for 42 nights, the villagers reported seeing smoke rising from the buried pot. They heard sounds of cooking, the sizzle of oil, the bubble of boiling water, the rhythmic scraping of a wooden spoon against clay. And sometimes, if you stood very still and listened very carefully, you could hear Nkiruka's voice humming the lullaby she used to sing to her children. A sign that somewhere, in that dark realm of hungry spirits, she was still herself, still fighting, still cooking to earn her freedom. 42 days after Nkiruka disappeared, the Chinedu woke before dawn and went to the buried pot. The entire village gathered with him, a silent vigil, waiting to see if the spirits would keep their word. As the sun broke the horizon, the steaming stopped. The pot went cold for the first time in 6 weeks. Then the ground began to shake. The earth around the pot cracked, split, and from that crack, a hand emerged. Thin, pale, but unmistakably human. Then another hand, then arms, shoulders, a head. Nkiruka pulled herself from the ground like a plant breaking through soil. She was changed. Her hair had gone completely white. Her skin was pale as bone. Her eyes held shadows that would never fully fade. The memory of things she'd seen in that dark realm. Things no living person should witness. But she was alive. "Mama!" The children ran to her, and Nkiruka caught them in her arms. Weeping, Chinedu followed, pulling his wife into an embrace that seemed to anchor her back to the world of the living. "I cook for them," Nkiruka whispered, her voice hoarse. 42 days, 42 meals, for spirits who could never be satisfied. They wanted me to fail, to refuse, to give them an excuse to keep me forever. But I didn't. I cooked every meal perfectly, and finally, they let me go. She pulled back, looking at her husband and children with eyes that had seen too much. "But I'm not the same," she said softly. "I've been changed, marked. I can see things now, the hungry dead that walk among us, invisible to normal eyes, the spirits that watch from shadows. I'll carry this sight until I die." "I don't care," Chinedu said fiercely. "You're home, you're alive. That's all that matters." But even as they embraced, even as the village celebrated her return, Nkiruka felt the weight of a new burden. She had escaped the realm of hungry spirits, yes, but she would never truly be free of them. Every shadow would remind her. Every cooking pot would echo with their demands. Every meal she prepared would carry the memory of feeding the endlessly hungry dead. The buried pot remained in the ground, a memorial and a warning. The village built a small shrine around it, and mothers would bring their daughters there to tell them Nkiruka's story. "This is what happens," they would say, "when you try to bind love with magic, when you try to force devotion instead of earning it, when you feed the wrong things and invite the wrong guests to your table." Nkiruka lived for many more years after her return from the spirit realm. Her hair never regained its color, and the shadows never left her eyes. But slowly, painfully, she rebuilt her life. Nkiruka became known in Umu-Ofi as a woman of wisdom, hard-earned, painful wisdom. People came to her with their problems, their desperate situations, their fears of loss, and she would always tell them the same thing. There is no magic that can force someone to love you. No powder, no spell, no bargain with spirits. Real love cannot be stolen or bound or manufactured. It can only be offered freely, and sometimes it won't be offered at all. That's the risk we take when we love. That's the price of being human. Some listened, others didn't. And every once in a while, Nkiruka would see someone walking toward Mama Ugotchi's hut in the forest, desperate and determined, and she would know. Another one was about to learn the lesson she'd learned. She would try to warn them, try to stop them, but desperate people rarely listen to warnings. They have to learn for themselves. Just as she had, on Nkiruka's deathbed, surrounded by her grown children and grandchildren, she made one final request. "Dig up the pot," she said weakly. "The one that's been buried all these years. Dig it up and show it to me." Her family hesitated, but they obeyed. When they unearthed the clay pot, they found it was still warm to the touch, even after all these years. still marked with the stains of that cursed powder, still carrying the echo of the meals that had fed the hungry dead. Nkiruka looked at it one last time and smiled sadly. "Destroy it," she said. "Break it into pieces and scatter them in the river. Let no one ever use it again. Let it be forgotten." "But Mama," Amara said gently, "we need it as a warning to teach future generations." "The warning is here," Nkiruka said, pointing to her own white hair, her shadow-darkened eyes, the marks left by her time in the spirit realm. "The warning is in the story. You don't need the pot. You just need to remember what happened when I tried to force love instead of earning it. When I fed my family to spirits instead of trusting that genuine affection was enough." She reached out and took her husband's hand. Chinedu, now old and gray himself, but still there, still by her side. "You see," she whispered, "he stayed. Not because of magic, not because of powder or spirits or bargains. He stayed because he chose to. And that choice, freely given, is worth more than all the forced devotion in the world." Her family destroyed the pot as she requested. Alright, they scattered the pieces in the river Niger, where the current carried them away to the sea. And when Nkiruka died, 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep, she left behind a legacy more valuable than wealth or status or even the fierce devotion she'd once craved. She left the truth. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that real love cannot be forced. And remember, the next time you're tempted to add a secret ingredient to keep someone close, ask yourself, are you cooking a meal or are you feeding spirits? Discussion question: have you ever been in a relationship where love was demanded rather than freely given? How did you recognize it? And how did you escape? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize the spirits they've been feeding.